I would say that if you look at the way they are talking about the new normal in China, I think there are three dimensions which are relevant for the rest of us. One is the lower growth. And lower growth in China has a huge impact on the rest of the world, because if you look at the decade beginning 2000, about 25% of global growth was due to Chinese growth. And therefore, if that engine of global growth slows down, it'll of course affect commodity producers most. A country like India may not be that affected because we are not that heavily dependent on Chinese markets. In fact, we may even benefit with the lower commodity prices. The second dimension of its new normal, as they call it, is a growing focus on correcting environmental and social imbalances. This is what they have been saying, that we need to focus as much on correcting these as on growth itself. And the third is, which is perhaps the most important, is the growing sense that China needs to pull its weight in global affairs and become a major player in global affairs. One dimension of this is this whole business of can the renminbi become a global currency? Already they are designating trade in terms of renminbi and so on. If I look at it from my perspective as an economist, I would say that the slowing down of growth was probably inevitable. They had a high burst of growth because they had this massive movement from rural to urban areas, which has been absolutely stupendous. But now that's tailing off. They are already in a phase where the labor supply force is not growing. They are past the demographic dividend. And sooner or later, they would have had to face this pressure of moving from labor-intensive, simple manufacture to higher intensity, more technologically intensive, and so on. So this was probably inevitable. I don't see this as a throttling back. I just see this as a natural evolution of the system. I think there will be challenges for them because the credit system is calibrated around 10% growth. And when you move from 10% to 7% and perhaps down the line even lower, then would you end up with a lot of difficulties on the non-performing assets in the banking system and so on. On the environmental and social balancing, everybody has recognized that they have a major job ahead. Social balancing, they're openly talking about inequalities in China and how we need to address this. And again, that will come to some extent naturally because of the growing upward pressure on wages with the shortages of labor and so on. But I think they are clearly also worried about environmental imbalances. I see them as being much more active on not just local problems, but also global problems. In terms of their third dimension, the positioning, I think this will be a much more complex task. It's not going to happen that quickly. The renminbi is not suddenly going to become an international currency. Look, today people go to London and New York not simply because they certainly don't go to London because sterling is considered a major global. It is no longer a major global currency, but they go to London. Why? Because there are financial services available there. There are bankers who are shrewd and clever and capable of giving advice. So also in New York. Also, what lies behind that is an open capital market. China doesn't have that. So it's going to take a lot of work to get Shanghai to compete with London and New York. So that's not going to happen all that quickly.
Right. So if we were to now sort of look at our own situation in India as we want to race back to double-digit growth and so on, what are the lessons, if any, that can be taken in at this point?
I would say that one of the lessons that I would draw from this is that when you are in that phase of high growth, start preparing for the later transition where you will have to slow down. For instance, one of the things that you have to prepare for is that as you start becoming more and more developed in terms of technology, you will find it increasingly difficult to buy technology from abroad, because right now you're catching up with the technologies which have been out there in the West for decades. But as you get closer to the technological frontier, you will have to have much more capacity to develop technology yourself. Let me give a concrete example, infotech. Today, the original work on infotech is not being done in India. It's being done, well, mainly in America, but a few other places. If you see what the major software producers, etc., are, they are all there. We are there as a user of these facilities. But as you start approaching the frontier, technological frontier, you will find that you will have to have a capacity to make original technological developments yourself, not just catch up, not just reverse engineering. Now, you can start anticipating this and start preparing for this even before you actually need this. I think you should also worry about the nature of your banking system and particularly the credit system and how it is going to move from a phase of high growth to low growth. But the only thing I would stress is that in India, the sort of eventuality that you see in China now is still a long way off. It's a very long way off. I mean, I think we have at least 20, 30 years
pollution,
of,
in areas like pollution, we
pollution,
seem to have caught
yes,
up.
in balancing of, and I would argue that, frankly, that is desirable, regardless of what China is doing, quite simply because it's a dimension of a quality of life which we ought to worry about. And I'm certain that if people's opinions were sought, they would happily say that, yes, certainly, let us address problems, particularly of local pollution, air and water, etc., even if it means a price in terms of growth, because it's affecting our children's health, it's affecting our health, and I think there's therefore no doubt in my mind that social and environmental rebalancing should not be postponed.
Right.
It should be integrated, and that's one difference because of our democracy. You know, that you can't afford to, because the people will throw you out if you don't do it. You know?
Right, Mr. Desai, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for
Thank
speaking
you very
with
much.
us.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing more of your program.
Thank you so much.